Welcome to Wise and Wonderful Women. So those of you, and I think I mentioned this before, anybody that has a pink little dot on their name tag is new, so welcome them. Can anybody from Impact 100 raise their hands? Okay. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Impact, but look around the room, so anybody sitting at your table, you might want to talk to them afterwards. But anyway, so I first want to just say thank you for sending the bios, because I just love the day before reading through them, and everyone is just really just awesome. And there are so many kind of stories behind all of you that I've been learning through the years. And I started to just feel like I wanted to sit down with each of you, and I haven't had the chance to do that. That's not realistic. But then I thought, I just want to hear your stories, and maybe I could do that. So I just started to film, sitting down and interviewing. It takes about 45 minutes. And just, it kind of organically develops into your story. And it doesn't have to be that you climbed Mount Everest, cured cancer. It's none of that. It's just real women, real stories, and that's what it's developed into. So we just started a Wise and Wonderful Women Instagram page, if my Instagram page wasn't insane enough. So this is going to be kind of focused on those interviews. And there's also a YouTube channel. So it's sort of a podcast-ish, sort of. But I've just loved doing them, and each one of them has been really inspirational. So I hope that you will take a look at those, and if you would like to talk with me, I'd be happy to interview you. So just reach out to me. So a few housekeeping items. So on your table there are flowers. You can fight over them, it'll be like a little cat fight. But anyway, don't take the vases. I have had people like put them underneath their coats. But you can take the flowers, and please do. And then there's also pads and there's pens. So if you want to take any notes, please feel free to do that. If you're taking them on your phone, it gets a little distracting because I think that you're bored and you're texting your friend. So anyway, so use the pads, take them, take the pens, no problem. So the reason why I do the bios is, number one, so that you can feel comfortable coming into the room, but also it says like where you live. And yes, I am Annie Gets It Done, the real estate broker. I am not asking you where you live so that I can find out where you live and if you own your apartment and if I can sell it. I am asking you so that you can go home together and you can kind of ask each other out. So, who lives on the Upper West Side? And I'm doing this, so look around, share a taxi, go on the subway together. And I want to just say it's kind of the Upper West Side. I just am a little partial. Okay, who lives on the Upper East Side? Okay, cool. You obviously, you have it much more together. You're like a cleaner group of people. You've got probably pearls or something. It's all much more together than the West Side. Okay, who is downtown? Okay, cool. So look around. We've got, I know, East Village, Brooklyn. Okay, well, there you go. There you go. Queens. Great. So you've got somebody behind you. Uptown. Let's see, above 96th Street. Okay, cool. So you got the two of you. So anyway, all good. I don't think I'm forgetting anything. So anyway. No, I'm sorry. You cannot share a cab. Like, come again. Like, anyway. No. So, speaking about taxis, so those of you, the genesis of the Wise and Wonderful Women came out of a taxi ad that I ran looking for a man. I run taxi ads for real estate, but I ran one looking for a guy, which went viral, and women were writing me saying you were badass to do that. So that's how this started. But in May of 2024, I had a heart attack, and I almost died. And what kept me alive was the information that I learned in these rooms. Because every year since 2019, I have had a cardiologist come and speak, and that cardiologist said, you're not going to be taken seriously when you get to the ER, you're going to be gaslit, you're going to be dismissed, and you have to advocate for yourself. The people in the hospitals are there anyway. You're not bothering anyone. And it's only because of that, and hearing the words, that I'm alive today. So one of my clients turned out to be the head of the American Heart Association here in New York. So I am actually, December 1st, look for it, it's going to run for a week, I don't think any of you know this. There's going to be a taxi ad that's going to say, I'm Anne Cundilanane, aka Annie Gets It Done. I've, Manhattan, Douglas Elliman is #1 Manhattan agent, but I'm also a heart attack survivor. And so it's for the Go Red campaign, and it basically calls out and says, ladies, do not be gaslit. And if there's one thing that I can tell you going into the holidays, your symptoms might be different. You know your body, trust it. You're not going to bother anybody, but you've got to just believe in yourself, and do not be 1 in 3 women that's going to die of heart disease in this country. Okay. So anyway, I'm going to be speaking on the survivor. It's not the survivor on an island. I would do terribly with that. I would have to eat every 6 hours. But I am speaking around the city, being a survivor for the New York Heart Association. So if anybody has a group of people, men or women, primarily women, that they would like for me to come, we can arrange that. Okay. Last but not least, we've got on the table some things on here. And you've got an Impact 100. So Impact 100 is a group of women. It's a national organization, but it was started in 2019 here in New York City, 2020. That is it's collective giving. So for $1,000, you're either able to just write a check and just leave it be and know that it's going to be going to a nonprofit here in New York, or you can become really involved. You can interview the different nonprofits that are going to be, wanting the grants. You can volunteer at some of the places that you'll learn about, but it's a wonderful, wonderful organization with wonderful women. But they are doing an event for anyone that would like to potentially join, or are members that are already there, in my friend Deb's store, which is called, it used to be called the Thrifty Hog. It's actually a combination of new clothes and donated clothes, and any of the proceeds that half of the store is the donated clothes. So if you've got nice clothes that you want to donate, bring them. If you have clothes that you want to buy, go there and spend, and know that the money for the donated clothes is going to help women and children in the New York City shelter. So there's an event there on the 4th of December. So if you'd like to come, please do that. She's also doing 4,000 gifts are being given, wrapped, bought, and handed out to kids in the New York City shelters through her. She is awesome. So if anybody wants to be a little elf and wrap, you can do that as well. December 16th, I never do an event in December because I got a lot on my plate, but I am going to do a holiday party. So it's a holiday party, but it's also with Danny Davis, who I interviewed, and I just loved her because she talked about finding her voice and about asking herself, what do I want, before you're asking what everybody else is needing and wanting for you, and finding that voice after a very painful divorce. So we laughed during this entire interview. So I'm going to have her up here. We're going to talk about finding our voice in different ways, medical agonists. You know what I mean? Thank you. But anyway, we're also just going to have a good time. So that's going to be on December 16th. I'm going to be sending that out. The Wise and Wonderful Women's Retreat. We did this last year. I just put it together. Oh my God, we had so much fun. There's only 32 spots. There's a lot of them already filled. I haven't sent it out to the group, but I'm telling you, it's $1,500. It is the best time you will have. It's December the 9th to the 11th. If anybody's interested, let me know. And if anybody wants a good holiday gift, especially for children, a friend of mine developed a scavenger hunt that kind of takes New York City landmarks and does these little scavenger hunts. It's a kind of a little kit that helps you kind of go through New York and different, it's really cool. So anyway, it's Ellen's Stories and Adventures for any New York-based kids. And then it says, keep in touch through Instagram, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's start these speakers. It's enough talking, and. Okay, so Julie Kay and I met at an event where Chris Creatora invited me. If anybody needs an amazing gynecologist, she's not here because of that, but I give her a shout out all the time because she is awesome. She covers everything. and she's terrific, she's over there. But she's also a staunch advocate for reproductive rights, and she walks the walk. So anyway, she's a fantastic doctor, but she's also just a hero in this space. And I met Julie through Chris. So Julie is an author, founder and CEO of Reproductive Futures, the legal frontline of reproductive health care, and was the lease attorney? The lead attorney. I'll be lead. Anyway, the lead attorney. We were tired. By the time we get to these, it's like, it was the lead attorney who designed and litigated the landmark abortion care, which helped lay the groundwork for the legalization of abortion in Ireland. So come up, Julie. And she is the author of the book that you guys all bought. And Lourdes Rivera has advocated for reproductive rights for more than 30 years. She's the president of Pregnancy Justice, a national organization that defends against pregnancy criminalization and fights for the rights and personhood of pregnant people. Come on up. So I wanted to start with one thing that was, you know what? We need a seat for you, right? Okay. I'm going to sit right there. Okay. Why don't you sit up here? Okay, perfect. So one of the things that I found disconcerting, and I don't want to start on a low note because we're going to go high, that we usually sell out. And this happened in October, right before the election last year. We usually sell out and we can hold 80 people here. And for this event and another one that we held, it was not as well attended. And I think it's because, and you can tell me because you work in this field, is it because people are feeling like hit, like blindsided? Because I still feel blindsided by Roe versus Wade being overturned. It seemed like it would never ever happen, and I feel like I'm still in shock. So do you see a little bit of that? I mean, you've got that. Here, sorry, go ahead. Okay.
Well, first of all, I'm delighted with it. What?
It's okay.
First of all, no,
That's all right. Speak and you.
first of all, I'm delighted to see so many people are here, and I think that's actually more representative of how women feel, that they do care deeply about these rights, because they are human rights, and I appreciate you bringing everybody together in community around it, because I think that is what will take us out of these dark days. But we are in some dark days. And I think a lot of what we call abortion fatigue, that things around abortion rights tend to kind of come in waves, and that we get sort of a horrible decision and everybody kind of cares and then it goes away. Or we get like a great ballot referendum result in Kansas and everybody's feeling up. And so it's a long, long battle. I mean, we've had Roe versus Wade in place for 50 years, and that was 50 years of anti-abortion forces chipping away at our rights. And I think we're getting there. We'll be on an upswing, but abortion has been a political football. And
right. But it's not. I mean, when Lourdes was when you were talking about pregnant people, right? So I was on the phone with a longtime assistant of mine who's moved. She fell in love with someone who was in California. They just moved. He's in the military, and they just moved to Georgia. And she calls us and she says, I'm pregnant. She sent the picture, and we're so excited. And then we start talking about the tests. Now, again, I'm 110. I was pregnant, when dinosaurs roamed the earth. But there's certain tests that you have because you're seeing if there's any chromosomal abnormalities, and you're going. And so I say, I was just we were just, and she said, what's strange? I only have one doctor's appointment set for the whole 9 months or something. And then I realized it wasn't only one, but it was 2. And I just was I just got sick because I realized, what is the point of having a test if you can't do anything about it? And she, at that moment, realized that she was in a state that she basically had no rights if her life was in jeopardy, if anything along the way went awry. So tell us, because it's not just about choosing to have an abortion or not.
That's a really important question. First of all, good evening, everyone. It's really delightful to be here with you. I just want to pick up.
Closer.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, please.
I just want to start with the framework of reproductive justice, which is something that women of color have been advocating for. Let me just start that I came into this space around sterilization abuse. 1/3 of my mother's
I'm sorry, what kind of abuse?
sterilization.
Sterilate.
abuse. So 1/3 of my mother's generation, we're from Puerto Rico, was sterilized without informed consent. So that's my entry point into this. So reproductive justice is about not only the right to not have a child, but it's also the right to have a child, and then the right to be able to raise our children in safe and sustainable communities. So, for example, the lead water in Michigan, in Detroit, that's a reproductive justice issue if it's poisoning our children and affecting our pregnancies. So, and you're absolutely right. All of these issues are very interlinked. Abortion bans affect pregnancy care because, for example, if you have an obstetric emergency and you show up at the hospital and you're miscarrying, in these abortion ban states, you're being told you have to wait till it becomes septic before you're able to end your pregnancy to save your health and your life, right? So everybody else under federal law, you get to get emergency medical care to help to prevent your health from being deteriorated. But if you're pregnant, because there's fetal life, and there's another person living inside of you, because you don't get to be a person as a pregnant person, which is why we talk about pregnant people, then you have to wait to almost die. And there have been people who have died waiting to get the care that they should have gotten. So what you're talking about is actually very, very salient.
Right. And it is important that you think about this when you're talking to your daughters, your granddaughters, when you're because if you get transferred, you're thinking, oh, I'm getting transferred, or I'm moving, or I fell in love with somebody, or I just want to try out a different state. I mean, Austin was like the #1 growing town, and now actually, interestingly enough, I was at a brokers conference, and they were saying that Austin is really got hammered with their real estate. I think it's overdevelopment, but I think it also is with a lot of young people not wanting to move to a state that this is what the reality is. So tell me a little bit about what, how the genesis of the book came about. And, sorry.
Yeah, so Controlling Women was written because my co-author, who argued Planned Parenthood versus Casey, and I were really aware of how the law had controlled abortion in ways that it doesn't control other parts of people's lives. And really looking at, the Controlling Women title is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but really looking at what is behind the abortion debate, what is going on with the control of whether, when, and with whom you have a child or not, and looking at how often it is very traditional gender stereotypes, it is often religious-informed stereotypes playing out through politics. But we had written the hardcover thinking, okay, what's happening now, even at the time of Roe, is not working well. There are way too many women who are disproportionately affected by restrictions on abortion, and we knew it was going to get worse because we knew that the Supreme Court, we always say you have to count to 5 to win a case at the Supreme Court, and we knew that when Trump appointed a 6th anti-abortion justice, we were cooked. This was a very deliberate plan of the anti-abortion movement. But we also wanted to talk about what could be done. And I think this is something that we go back to a lot, is that I always say it's the best of times and the worst of times. It's the worst of times because we lost a very important constitutional federal right. It's the worst of times because almost half the states have really restricted access to abortion and all the effects that go around that with this kind of paralyzing providers of health care, treating pregnant women. But it's also the best of times because of telemedicine, which I can talk more about as well. That's kind of my focus and obsession now. But also because 70% of Americans support the Roe versus Wade framework. And And we think, in individual cases, it goes beyond that. When you're looking at an individual person in your family or your healthcare provider. So we know that it has been sort of held hostage as an issue by, very conservative right-wing and religious forces. But we also know that abortion is a standalone issue. When it's on the ballot or when it's really highlighted, it's a winning issue. So I'm an optimist, but I'm also very concerned about who is affected right now, and that disproportionately it is women of color, it is poor women, it is women who are young or have limits on their right to travel. I can talk a little bit more about what's going on in the landscape now, but I think we have to get through these times. We have to have these conversations, and I do believe that ultimately we are on a pathway towards being in a better place than we were even when Roe was the law of the land.
Can we talk about telemedicine, because that was something that was really interesting to me. So, and I don't know whether Lourdes wants to speak to that, but that's your wheelhouse, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So
Chris will tell me if I'm doing
let's say
this right.
you live in Georgia.
Telemedicine is, so medication abortion is now the vast majority of abortion. It's a series of 2 pills that are proven safe over many decades. It came to this country in the 90s as RU46, or the French abortion pill. But it's
Is that Plan B?
No, Plan B is the emergency contraception. This is
So Plan B you take and the condom breaks, or you didn't use protection, you feel like you might be pregnant. Plan B will end the pregnancy or potential.
Yes, so everyone
Keep
who
you
goes
from
to
getting
college
pregnant.
should go
Right.
to Plan B, and it has gotten more and more available as emergency contraception. What I'm talking primarily about is mifepristone, which is one of 2 drugs that are used in combination to have an abortion through 13 weeks or 12 weeks of pregnancy.
Okay, so up till 13 weeks or
Yes.
12. Okay, so you can
And
take
it
the
is-
2 pills.
You
How
take
far
the 2
apart?
pills. It's basically over 48 hours. You take the pills. You have what are described as flu-like symptoms, some cramping. It varies from people. Some women feel a lot, others don't. But it is basically a 2-day process of a very heavy period, and then you've had your abortion. It is again, the vast majority of women, whether they live in abortion-friendly states or in states with bans or restriction, are choosing that method. It is less expensive. It's not, and now I feel like I'm tiptoeing into the medicine, so I'm going to back up a little bit on that, but it is something that whether you are driving to pick up the pill, whether you're going to the Upper East Side, or whether you're going somewhere in, getting it through the mail, you're getting the same kind of medication. And so what telemedicine means is that you get a licensed doctor who does a screening over the internet, looks at whether you have any risk factors. You then pay $150 to $250 or less if you can't afford it, and a pharmacy, a mail order pharmacy, sends you the exact same medications that you would otherwise drive to pick up. And so what we've seen is a quarter of all abortions are through this process of telemedicine.
Okay, so a couple of questions. What would the potential risk factors be? So if you couldn't do this if you were, is there anything that would be like a big red flag?
I'm not the medical person in the room, but there's the medical risks and the legal risks. So I turn to the medical, and Chris turns to the legal, typical doctor lawyer. But basically, the medical risks are very minimal. It's very safe and effective, and it's been proven for decades. The legal risks are for the patient. It is never a crime to self-manage your care in this country. So I could, walk up and take pills if I were younger and pregnant, but there are often, and this is Lourdes can tell us more, just because it's not considered a crime to self-manage your care and have an abortion doesn't mean that a prosecutor's not going to come after you for something else.
Okay, so I'm in Texas, and where would I go to get this? What website am I going to?
So you have a number of choices of websites.
Where do you learn
a trusted provider? The main provider, the vast number are from Aid Access, which is
Aid Access?
Aid Access.
Okay. And so you just Google, if you Googled chemical pregnancy, chemical abortion, medical abortion.
If you Google,
not medical abortion, sorry, drug.
If you Google medication abortion, it is hard to find. There's a website called Plan C and another one called I Need an A, and those websites will tell you what's your state, where you can get all the different providers.
Okay, wait, hold on a second, because I have to go back. So if I'm in Texas and I'm a young woman, because this is recorded too, so I want to be able to give people the resources. What are the 3 websites that you can go to around the country to get the medication?
I would say start with either Aid Access or I Need NA, as in I Need an Abortion, or Plan C. There's also Massachusetts Abortion Access Provider. They're another organization online. And I think the thing is that the telemedicine providers means that you're getting a licensed doctor using certified medication from what's called a shield state. So there are 8 states that have passed laws saying if you're in New York or one of 7 other states and you're a licensed practitioner in this state, you're following all the medical guidelines and you ship somebody pills, that provider is protected and that woman again is not going to be criminally liable. So you're getting the same pills that you would get if you're in Mississippi and you go to a telemedicine shield provider in one of these 8 states, you're getting the same pills as if you drove 600 miles to Illinois to put your hand out.
Okay, so Laura's got a question. So my understanding was in Texas, for instance, if you say to me, I'm pregnant, I can't have my 4th child, and I need to terminate, that there is basically like I can get $10,000 by turning you in. So how does that work? Because now Chris sends the medication to me. You know that I am terminating my pregnancy. My pregnancy is now gone. You go to the authorities and say, there's a bounty on my head.
Well, yes. So Texas, even before Roe was overturned, passed this law that in my prior job we challenged, and unfortunately the Supreme Court, anticipating, I think, the Dobbs decision, just let it ride, which basically allowed any Joe Schmo, to file a case and try to collect $10,000 from somebody for aiding and abetting an abortion.
So somebody that crossed a state line, had an abortion in another state,
Right.
somebody that potentially so would the laws for the shielding laws,
Yeah.
would that cover that, or that's a?
Well, there's
And is Texas the only state that has the bounty?
I'm going to go with the
Yeah.
shield law on this because so what my organization Reproductive Futures does is we protect providers of care who are shield law providers, and we make sure that telemedicine providers don't get dragged into these lawsuits from Texas. So it's, in New York and 7 other states, the doctor's protected. So as long as you're in the state, you're licensed, you're providing the medication. If, let's say, somebody from Texas or Louisiana comes and says, you know what, you committed an abortion in my state, I have a criminal indictment, I'm going to bring you back to Louisiana to stand trial. And this happened to a Dr. Maggie Carpenter, who I worked very closely with, and Governor Hochul stood up and said, no, we have a shield law, I'm not going to extradite, she's safe within the state. And similarly with the civil laws, when Ken Paxton came out of Texas and said, we've got a judgment against you for a civil case for doing an abortion in Texas, and brought that to a New York court, and the New York court clerk said, we have a shield law, I'm not going to enter that judgment against the doctor. So Alabama, Arkansas, Texas, all these places have bans and are very strict about it. Louisiana has some laws that are specifically trying to go after stopping telemedicine shield laws. New York, California, Washington, Massachusetts, Vermont, the other states have these shield laws. And so there's this conflict between the laws. And I always say it's very similar to when we had marriage equality. And we had Massachusetts saying, you know what, same-sex couples can get married. And in Texas, they were saying sodomy is a crime. So it's working right now. Telemedicine is providing about a quarter of abortions nationwide, and about 14,000 to 16,000 women each month in the South in banned states are able to get safe and legal medications from a licensed practitioner. And so I want to make sure that Lourdes talks about kind of where things go off the rails generally for women who are pregnant, but for the shield law and for getting those pills, you may be living, your kid may be at Tulane or your friend or your neighbor, and they may have to travel back up to New York to get care, or they may decide to get those same medications shipped to them. So it's been a very bright spot in this, and what Reproductive Futures does is really look at how can we keep that going? How can we work with these mission-driven providers? How can we let women have a choice of whether they want to travel, whether they want a surgical, or whether they want to get the pills at home?
So for an organization like I Need an A, is that something that's a nonprofit? So, I mean, again, call to action, right? So what can we do? Obviously, Planned Parenthood. We will, at the end, we kind of send a thank you for coming, and I want to be able to send out places that you can donate to and those resources. So are there organizations that people should be funding, especially end of the year giving? So.
Well, yes, but I would like to talk about, pregnancy criminalization, because it's not just about abortion.
Let's just throw out there so I don't forget it. Are there?
I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't mention my own organization, Reproductive Futures. We are the ones looking at the law and policy and legal representation for providers, as well as activism. We're passing more shield laws. We're working to really make sure that telemedicine grows and doesn't get intimidated by aggressive anti-abortion practitioners. There are other organizations like Plan C and I Need an A that are websites that kind of direct you of how to find that. Telemedicine is a very different space from traditional brick and mortar clinics, and I think that's always important to have. The clinics are literally under fire and are being attacked. They do not provide telemedicine abortion. This is a very new space, and one that we're really working to make sure is known about and expanded upon.
So I just wanted to pick up, first of all, pregnancy justice. We defend against pregnancy criminalization, including providing criminal defense in these cases. But a couple things to pick up on what Julie was saying earlier in terms of this being the best of times and the worst of times. I think the worst of times, I think we're all very familiar with it, but this is also an opportunity to go beyond Roe, because Roe is just not working for a lot of people.
In what way? What do you mean?
Well, there are all the track laws, right? So it was a right on paper, but there was no access.
Okay, so I'm sorry. What is it? What's a track?
So a track law is...
I'm sorry, is it track?
TRAP.
Sorry, okay.
Track law, which was all kinds of unnecessary restrictions on abortion clinics. For example, the hallways have to be a certain number of feet wide. You have to have operating room equipment, even though you're never going to use it, so things like that. So basically the idea while Roe was in place was to run these businesses out of existence. And a lot of clinics did close around the country. And then the first restriction was the Hyde Amendment, which was in 1976, which prevented Medicaid, federal funds under the Medicaid program to pay for abortion services for most of them. And so for a lot of poor women, that meant that they didn't have access, right? So Roe by itself did not protect actual access for a lot of people. But even while Roe was in place, so over the 20 years of our existence, we have been tracking pregnancy criminalization going back to 1973, and also defending against pregnancy criminalization. Because the prosecutors have not been using abortion bans. They've been using child abuse and neglect. They've been using abuse of corpse. These statutes.
I'm sorry, what was the last one?
Abuse of corpse, which is basically a law that was meant to punish
corpse?
Abuse of corpse, which is a law that was meant to punish necrophilia, for example. But it's being used in the context of criminalizing stillbirths and miscarriages, and then, as people do, they bury or they dispose of fetal remains. I had a miscarriage, right? I got a pill from my doctor. I was sent home to sit on my toilet, right? That's what people do. Or sometimes people have a nice, wonderful shrine in their backyard, right? And then later these fetal remains could be found, and then they get prosecuted. They get charged with homicidal murder. We had a client, or we were working on a case in Maryland where abortion continues to be legal, but this woman was sentenced for 30 years in prison because she had a stillbirth at home. And what the evidence was that she kept her pregnancy private, she didn't get prenatal care, and she had research access to abortion in Maryland, where abortion is legal. But, you know, and she had a stillbirth instead, and she was prosecuted and sentenced to 30 years. We intervened with an amicus brief, and the state Supreme Court adopted our rationale, basically said that Maryland law does not support this ideology or this idea that fetuses have separate legal rights from the pregnant person, and you cannot use gender stereotypes as evidence. And what was being proffered by the prosecutor was based on like the good mommy narrative. Like what would good women do, right? And she was a bad woman. So her sentence did get thrown out, and she's going to be entitled to a new trial. But this is happening. You know, pregnancy criminalization is happening. The top 3 states are Alabama, Oklahoma, and South Carolina, but it's happening across the country. We have cases here in New York and California, Michigan. So it's not just a red and blue state. It's more, but it's very much more prevalent in certain states.
Huh.
I have a question. I wonder if I was asking. I wonder how medical schools are handling this. Are they teaching the process of abortion, or care that if a woman needs the care?
My understanding is that more and more doctors are not going into obstetrics at all. I mean, am I
Look, I think every time abortion is criminalized, it chills the provision of care, it chills the training. They're not, not having the kinds of numbers of practices in these places where you're not providing abortions. That's the same kind of treatment you would have for miscarriage management. I think if you start off with a story of somebody in Georgia not getting an amniocentesis, those kinds of things. I saw that a lot when I lived in Ireland. They had a constitutional ban on abortion that had been in effect almost 20 years, and it had a horrible impact on IVF care, on miscarriage management, on fetal anomalies. It was this, why would we diagnose it if we can't do anything about it? I think this is pulling down the level and provision of medical care, but I've also had some really good experience working with Medical Students for Choice, which is a wonderful group of just very dynamic providers who are, I have been told that medical school is very difficult and time-consuming, and yet these groups are real activists. They held a big sale that raised $13,000 for my organization. They are just looking to learn more, and they realize the politics behind this. And what we have seen also is that family care practitioners have entered into providing abortion services more because medication abortion makes it easier. And one of the things you can do is ask your OBGYN, are you providing abortion services? And if not, why not? And sometimes it comes down to, insurance, those kinds of things. There are other hurdles, but training is definitely something that we have to keep talking about, how bans on abortion are affecting care widely, and what it means for women and those who love them, as they say. Violet?
Would the speakers please repeat the questions from the audience?
Oh, sure, sorry.
And project, even though you're using the microphone.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry about
Speak.
that.
The question was, you'll hear when the mic is working,
Okay,
so.
thank you for that. The question was whether medical schools, whether there are fewer and fewer providers, as well as less training as a result of the state we're in now. Not the New York state, but the world that we're in now.
Well, a state like Idaho is bleeding OBGYNs, right? So now,
Why is that?
well, because of the abortion ban, because doctors are feeling that they cannot ethically provide care in the way that they have been trained. And there's
Sorry, can we shut up our phones?
So you're like, shut it off.
Sorry.
and they're,
I'm so sorry, when you say they're bleeding OBGYNs, I don't
they're
understand.
leaving the state.
They're leaving.
They're leaving the state and
Yes.
creating maternal care deserts. So it's basically cutting off your nose to spite your face and it's impacting maternity care at large. So it's a losing proposition.
Right. Just because we're here when Annie gets things done, but I was going to say one of the things that Reproductive Futures is doing, and we're partnering with Pregnancy Justice on some of this work, is looking at states where there are extreme restrictions on abortion, and those states, many of them have life-saving or other health-saving kind of carve-outs, but doctors and other medical providers are really, we say deer in the headlights because they want to treat people. Nobody goes into medical care to not treat people, but they're also risking their license, their lives are done in criminalization. So we've created a project that we call the Doctor Lawyer Alliance, and what we're doing is going into states and really looking at the law and teaming up with emergency room providers and saying, okay, let's talk through this. Here's what the law is, here's what your patient comes in and has these symptoms. How do you want to treat that person? Is that pregnancy going to be viable? If not, let's move forward. What does the patient want? And really going hand in hand through these scenarios, and we've created this blueprint so that doctors and other healthcare providers can provide care because they want to and they want to do it safely. And everyone says, well, what about the hospital general counsels, or aren't the doctors anti-abortion? And what we're finding more and more, the hospital general counsels want nothing to do with this. No lawyer wants to call on a Saturday night from a doctor, I've got a patient, what do I do? They're delighted to have the protocol. And healthcare providers want to practice and serve patients. They may have anti-abortion views. I would say the vast majority don't, because the vast majority of Americans do not hold anti-abortion views. So we're really looking at what happens when a patient comes into the emergency room. How can we stop them from being criminalized? Because often somebody says, oh, this person came in and said that they took a pill, I'm going to call the local district attorney. Not only do they not have to, but they shouldn't be doing that. And we want doctors to have the tools ahead of time before the patients come into the emergency room.
Are there any questions that anybody has?
How much of a threat do you see the change in personhood laws and so on?
So the question was, how much of a change do you see in personhood laws? So just explain what personhood laws are.
So a big driver of pregnancy criminalization is this radical idea that was proffered by the anti-abortion movement ever since Roe versus Wade, right? But they were not successful, so they started embedding that idea. And so they couldn't get it through Congress, so they started embedding that idea in state law.
Yes. What is that idea?
I'm gonna guess.
Okay.
So the idea is that your fertilized egg, embryo, or fetus has separate legal rights. And their ultimate goal is to establish 14th Amendment personhood rights with equal protection and due process rights at the same time that a pregnant person, we just lost that, right, in the Dobbs decision. People who are born here, their 14th Amendment rights to citizenship is being attacked, but yet a fertilized egg should have 14th Amendment rights. So that is what we are encountering here. And what does that allow? It allows, for example, that I talk about pregnancy loss being criminally suspect now. There are 1 million miscarriages and about 20,000 plus stillbirths that happen across the country every year. So those become, depending on your local prosecutor, which is an elected office, by the way, can become criminally suspect. And any action that some authority decides, it puts your pregnancy at risk, is potentially criminal. This has come up, this legal framework has been built over time, attacking people that have substance use disorder. It started with the war on drugs in the 70s and 80s, targeting Black women, right? And by the way, people across demographics use drugs. It is not just one particular demographic, right? But it was Black women. It was all part of the mass incarceration of Black people in communities of color. So, but embryos and fetuses became separate crime victims. And this ideology has been built up in state law, which is why laws like child abuse and neglect, chemical endangerment, drug trafficking to your fetus through the umbilical cord, right? So these are the kinds of crimes that people are being charged with. And it makes no sense because I have yet to meet the person that becomes pregnant first and then says, oh, I'm gonna go take drugs. It is usually somebody that has a substance use disorder, has a health condition, which is a mental health condition, and what they need is access to health care. And people stay away from medical providers if they think they're gonna call the cops. Or if they think they're gonna call Child Protective Services
It feeds
and
on
take their
itself.
children away.
Right.
And we have, in Tennessee, there was a law that was specifically passed to criminalize substance use disorder during pregnancy. And the maternal and infant mortality rates spiked. When the law sunset, it kind of, went back to prior levels. So it's just wrong-headed.
Right, and I think that's where the real sort of handmade stuff comes in too, because the goal of the anti-abortion movement, this sort of crown jewel, has always been a human life amendment. It's been kicking around the United States. It was what was put into the Irish Constitution, and once.
And so what is that? Sorry.
So it means that in the Irish Constitution, it would mean that the rights of the unborn and the mother are equal. And that was the language of it, and you can sort of dress it up or say that life begins at conception, however you want to put it into the law. But what it means is that when your rights are so far diminished because you're pregnant, it can start certainly with substance abuse, but it means you have a glass of wine or a cigarette or go skiing, or you decide you don't want a C-section. It really diminishes, and it is, it goes back to sort of the controlling women piece of this, and it's such a devaluation of women's lives. I think that those, the overturn of Roe versus Wade has really emboldened the anti-abortion movement. And I think that, frankly, they were expecting more out of President Trump than they've gotten so far. And it's hard to say, is he, just testing the winds and knows that 70% of us support abortion rights, or is he sort of waiting till after the midterms, or is he just distracted by destroying Planned Parenthood? I don't know. I try not to crawl into his brain because it's yucky.
Dark place.
But I think, they have been very involved at the state level, and they are trying to sort of pass these laws declaring mifepristone to be a controlled substance, declaring it equivalent of an opioid, and declaring that, right starting at birth, these kinds of things that they're really test driving in some of these states. And then others like New York and other places. With New York, we put an equal rights amendment for women in the Constitution during the last election, Prop 1, that many of you have heard of. We've got shield laws. So we're really in this kind of, binary time where there's so much that is being tried out in the states, and I think it's so important to keep an eye on what's going on in New York as well as in places that are very hostile to women's rights.
Absolutely.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and then what I will say, please, Chris, you're fantastic about letting me know of different kind of events that are happening, benefits that are happening, and when you send them to me, I post them on the Wise and Wonderful Women's Facebook page. I'll be putting them on the Instagram page. Please come and support these things. It's number one, wonderful, because you can leave tonight feeling that, Jesus, we're just like in this dark hole. But meetings like this, connecting with like-minded people, it's empowering. We must continue to do it. And we must continue to support organizations that are fighting this fight as well. So if I send it out, come, join, walk the walk. Mindy, you had a question.
I just was wondering what the effect on IVF.
Well,
Exactly, and we have to make this super short because we have to cut this. So
that's the problem.
So Alabama, I don't know if you remember, there was an incident in the hospital where some embryos were destroyed, and then the owners of those embryos sued the hospital for wrongful death of a child. And the state Supreme Court declared those frozen embryos extra-uterine children, so that just stopped dead IVF access in the state until the state legislature acted. But it's a temporary fix because there's also state constitutional amendment. which is one of these personhood amendments, which it's just a matter of the next case that's brought up under that constitutional
Great,
amendment.
because if you have an embryo, then, and if it's in the lab, then
That's a person.
that's a person, and I put the person in storage, and I guess that's obviously a problem.
And a frozen usually the world's most expensive tiny apartments.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think I will say, maybe we have to not end on an optimistic note, if I say.
Yes, let's do it.
You know, I named my organization Reproductive Futures because I think the future is using telemedicine more, is reaching women with prenatal care, with IVF, however much we can coordinate from doctors and experts wherever they are to reach women in rural areas, to reach them in areas where healthcare has been badly politicized. And so the potential to sort of make not just telemedicine abortion available, but emergency contraception, prenatal care, IVF counseling and things is really there. And I think it's very easy to feel very beaten down right now. It's very easy to be outraged, and we should be outraged at the disparate racial impact and age impact and everything else. But let's not forget how powerful that we are as this group and as women who are winning on this issue, because this is not your mother's pre-Roe days. This is not the days when, you know, there are huge turnout for anti-abortion, even marches and voting. And what happened at the Supreme Court is horrible, and what we're living with now is horrible, but I do think that moving towards the future is pretty bright.
Amen to that.